Vyasa, you, the goddess, who rains down the nectar of Advaita in 18 chapters, the destroyer of relative existence. I worship Krishna, world teacher, the son of Vasudeva, the supreme delight of Devaki, and the slayer of the demons, Kamsa and Chanur. I adore that supremely blissful Madhava, by whose grace the mute are made eloquent, and the lame are enabled to cross over mountains. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So greetings to everyone, and we will begin today where I left off last time. That is, we're to start on verse 16 of chapter 2. And let me just mention it, not that it's important, but just because some people would want to know that I'm changing the editions of the Gita that I'm working from. It doesn't matter what edition you have, because I will translate each verse, and then the only difference it will make is that I read an English translation after I have translated and discussed the verse. And so now I'm going to be reading from Swami Vireshwaranandaji's Gita and Sridhara's commentary. I have been using Madhusudana's commentary by Swami Gambhirananda, and I will continue to use that for interpreting the Gita, basically. But because Swami Vireshwarananda's English translation is much simpler, the English is much simpler and more straightforward, I'm going to use that from now on. But again, whatever you use, if you want to follow along in the text, it doesn't matter. The only qualification I would make on that is that the Krishna Consciousness Gita that's known as the Bhagavad Gita as it is, translated and commented upon by Prabhupada, that the interpretation will be very different from what we give. I give the basic Vedanta tradition of the Shankaracharya's interpretation of the Gita, with the modern light thrown on it by Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. But the Gaudiya Vaishnava school of interpretation of the Gita is very different, because they consider the supreme reality as the form of Sri Krishna itself, the Rupa, the Murti of Sri Krishna. They don't accept the idea of the Nirguna Brahman, but that clearly is part of the Gita itself. And so there's nothing, I have nothing against that school of Vedanta or that translation, except that it will be quite different from the way we interpret it. So, to bring us up to where we are now, verse 16, just very briefly, you know the story of how Arjuna has seen the opposing army, seen his uncles and cousins and his gurus that he's to fight with, and he falls apart. He says that he can't fight because it would be the destruction of society. It would be cutting the very fabric of society to fight with these people, so he refuses to fight. And then Sri Krishna, in the second and third verses of chapter 2, tells Arjuna that he is acting in an unmanly fashion. That is an Arya Jushtam. It's not worthy of an Arya, of a noble person like him. And so he must stand up and do his duty. That his whole life has prepared him for this battle. It's a righteous battle, and he must do his duty. And so then again, Arjuna gives various arguments. And last time we began on verse 11, which is where Shankaracharya begins his tradition, his commentary on the Gita. He doesn't make any commentary on the first chapter or the first 10 verses of the second chapter. He only begins on verse 11 of chapter 2, where Sri Krishna begins to teach Arjuna. And as I said last time, Sri Krishna begins by teaching Arjuna the nature of the divine self. He doesn't begin with prapatti, surrender to God, or devotion to God, or how to meditate, or anything else. He begins by telling him about his own divine nature, how he is the Atman, which is eternal, indestructible, And the reason for that is that Arjuna is in a critical situation. He's in a life and death situation where he has lost all of his courage, all of his self-composure, his mental balance is completely undone. And so Sri Krishna, being the divine being itself, knows that the only thing that will rouse Arjuna is the call to his innate divinity, call to the divinity which is manifesting as him. And so just as Swami Vivekananda in the modern times, he went around the world teaching about the Atman. Even when he taught devotion, which he did, he would put it on the basis of non-dualism. And he would say that always remember that the hand who reaches down in answer to your prayer is your own hand. Not this hand, the hand of the higher self, the hand of the Paramatman, which we are. And so that is getting across the idea that there's no difference between you and the Supreme Self. God is not somewhere outside of you that is sitting somewhere ignoring you when you're in trouble, and then you pray and then God says, well, I guess I better help them out, and so then comes and helps you. No, God is your own higher self. In the Gita you find that Sri Krishna goes in this second chapter, he speaks mainly from the standpoint of the Atman. But in future chapters, especially 7 through 12, and even beyond that, 7 through 18, he keeps going between the appeal to the Atman and Ishvara, God. Because in non-dualistic Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, there is not the radical distinction between the inner self, our own self, and the divine self. No, we are not Ishvara, but Ishvara is Brahman and we also are Brahman. And so we don't make the sun rise or make the sun set. We don't control the destiny of all beings, but we are the same infinite Brahman that Ishvara is. And so in Brahman, we are one with Ishvara. In manifestation, we have small, very limited power. God has infinite power. We have a tiny bit of knowledge. God has infinite knowledge. But in reality, in Brahman, we are both one. And so that is the reason why in the Gita, Sri Krishna keeps going from appealing to the Atman to appealing to Ishvara, because going back and forth is not the contradiction which it would seem to be. So we come to verse 16 in chapter 2, which says, Nasato vidyate bhavo na bhavo vidyate sataha ubhayorapi drishtontas tvanayos tattvadarshibhihi. So this says, Nasato vidyate bhavo, that of the non-existent, asato, of the non-existent, bhavo nasti. There is no bhava. That is, the non-existent has no existence. That which doesn't exist never comes to exist. Na bhavo vidyate sataha. Nor of the existent is there ever non-existence. So in simpler terms, that means that that which is never ceases to be. And that which isn't never comes into being. Now, you know that in Christian theology, one of the basic ideas in Christian theology is ex nihilo creation, that God created the universe out of nothing. Now, Vedanta says that that's impossible. Why? Because out of nothing, you get nothing. You can't get something out of nothing. Nothing means it doesn't exist. And suddenly something exists. Where did it come from? It must have been in another form before its present manifestation. When a child comes into this world, is given birth, then it looks like a new creation. The child has just come, but no, it's not a new creation. Neither the physical material, which was pre-existent, forming the body and the mind of the child, nor the Atman, the self. Those of you who have had children, or those of you who don't have children but had brothers and sisters, know how little children always are curious about, Mommy, where was I before I was born? And mother may say, well, you were in my tummy. I said, well, where was I before that? They want to know what their previous existence was. They can't believe that they never existed. Nobody can believe that they never exist. And that's why we have this contradictory idea that I'm never going to die. In reality, you are never going to die. And so this idea that everybody has, we think that we see people dying all around us, as Yudhishthira says in the Mahabharata. The strangest thing in the world is we see people dying all around us, but we think that we will never die. Well, that's because we have an intuition of the eternal nature of the self. We just misapply it to the body and think this is never going to die. I'm never going to die means this body is never going to die. But of course we know when we think about it that we will, this body will die, but we won't die. We existed before birth. We will exist after death, because nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sata. That which doesn't exist never comes into existence, and that which exists never goes out of existence. So why is Sri Krishna teaching this to Arjuna? Because Arjuna is undone at the idea of killing and being killed. He's undone by the idea that he has to enter into battle and fight with his kinsmen and his gurus. And so the idea of killing them has made him fall apart. Luckily, most of us never have to face that situation. And may we never have to face that situation. But Arjuna did. So the lesson of the Gita is not that you can kill somebody and it doesn't matter because they're going to be eternal anyway. No, the lesson of the Gita is that we never die. We never die, nor does anyone die. And so when death comes to the body, that's not the tragedy it looks like. We feel sad, as I think I explained last time, or maybe it was in the class here, I forget which. But we feel sad because we have lost a dear one, that whose company we love. But for the person who has passed away, there's no sadness. We weep to think that, oh, this young person died before they could experience high school graduation. They couldn't go to college. The beautiful wedding that would have happened for them, and the future career, and all of these things. That's from our standpoint. From the soul that passes away, whether they pass away young or middle-aged or old, it's like waking up from a dream. When you wake up from a dream, you don't think, oh my goodness, I lost that beautiful house I had in the dream. What am I going to do now? I'm so sad, I'm so sad. No, you realize that was a dream. I awakened and now I move on. And so when we pass away, excuse me, we wake up from this dream, but unless we're illumined, we wake up into another dream. We go from dream to dream. So all of this that we see disappears and something else appears. A new life appears to us, a new existence, a new world appears to us. But for the departed, there's nothing to grieve over. As Sri Krishna said in the 11th verse, which we took last time, Ashochanan vashochastvam prajnavadamscha bhashase. You're grieving for those who shouldn't be grieved over. The wise never grieve over anyone, because they realize the eternity of the soul, and death is just a change of form. And so the non-existent never comes into being, the existent never goes out of being. Ubhayorapi drishtontas tvanayos tattvadarshibhihi. Those who know the truth, tattvadarshis, those who know the truth, they know this truth about both, about non-existence and about existence. And so the running translation is, the unreal has no existence, and the real has no non-existence. The conclusion about both these has been seen by the knowers of truth. The knowers of truth have seen the conclusion of both existence and non-existence. What does non-existence mean? It means that it is not. So non-existence is a word that we use to indicate something which doesn't exist at all. And so it's the strange nature of language that when we talk about something, it seems to have a real. And so we can talk about non-existence. And we might say all kinds of things about non-existence, what it is not and why it is not and so forth. But the fact that it's not means that it's not. There's nothing there called non-existence. It's not, we think of it as a label, and everything that has a label, it goes on the thing itself. But non-existence, where do you put the label on non-existence? It means there's no such thing. And out of that, nothing can come. So that's why in Vedanta, we say that this whole universe has come out of Brahman itself. It's come out of Brahman itself. And it is even now Brahman. Insofar as anything here has existence, this seems to exist. This body seems to exist. That existence is the existence of Brahman. The body itself is an appearance of Brahman. This table is an appearance of Brahman. This text is an appearance of Brahman. Everything that exists by virtue of Brahman itself. Brahman alone is existence, and everything else is an appearance of existence. And so Vedanta doesn't say that the universe doesn't exist, nor does it say that the universe came out of nothing. No, the universe came out of Brahman, and it is an appearance of Brahman. So that's where the theory of Maya and all of that comes. As Swami Vivekananda says, Maya is not a theory, nor does it mean illusion. It means that we are seeing something, but we're misreading it. We're misreading it. If we had the eyes of Sri Ramakrishna, that is the spiritual eye of Sri Ramakrishna, we would see that everything is divine. Everything is Brahman. Everything is like, as he would say, it's like the figures in a wax museum. Everything is made out of wax, but it looks real. But when you go close, you find it's nothing but wax. And so he would see everything here as Brahman itself, just taking on name and form. So the unreal has no existence, or that is the non-existent has no existence, and the existence has no non-existence. The conclusion about both these has been seen by the knowers of truth. So he continues in verse 17, the same idea. Avinashi tu tad vidhi yena sarvamidam tatam vinasham avyayasyasya nakaskit kartum arhati. So that says, Avinashi tu tad vidhi, but know that that which is indestructible, but know that which is indestructible, which pervades all of this, that the indestructible pervades all of this. Now again, as I said, language is a strange thing because it points to a truth where we can use it to point to a truth, but it never quite expresses the truth. And so when we say that the reality, Brahman, pervades all of this, it's not really like that. That's what we have to say because we have to use words. But if you say that Brahman pervades everything here, as Sri Krishna is saying here, again, it's the best way that you can express it, it sounds like there is all of this, and in the midst of it, there's something else called Brahman pervading it. But no, Brahman is what we're seeing. So it's not that there is something like this, which I call a hand, and that Brahman is inside of it somehow, pervading it, but there's the hand and Brahman inside of it. No, it's not like that. That Brahman is the reality of it. Brahman is the reality of it, but I'm misreading it as physical hand. And so the avinashi tu tad vidhi yena sarvamidam tatam. So know that which pervades all of this to be imperishable. So the reality which appears as all of this is imperishable, avinashi. It can't be destroyed. Vinasham avyayasya nakasti kartamarhati. No one can destroy the indestructible. No one can destroy that which is indestructible. And reality is indestructible. Everything else is just changing of forms, changing of forms, changing of appearances. But the reality, which, as Sri Krishna says, is pervading all of this, which is manifesting as this, which is appearing as all of this, that is never destroyed. So like the conservation of matter, the conservation of energy, there is the conservation of reality. Reality never changes. Reality never disappears. Only the form changes. Like if you have a piece of clay, you can mold it into various shapes, but you still have the same clay. You can make all kinds of things out of a piece of clay, an infinite variety of forms you can mold out of it, but it's still, the clay is still there, no matter what form you give to it. So everything here is just forms given to the formless Brahman. So, but know that by which all this is pervaded to be imperishable. Avinashi tu tadvidhi. No one can bring about the destruction of this immutable principle. So Brahman, no one can destroy. The Atman, no one can destroy. That which is, no one can destroy, because that which is never comes to non-existence, as that which does not exist never comes into existence. As I was saying in language, language many times fools us into thinking that things are different from the way they actually are. And the same can be said in mathematics. You know, the ancient Greeks and Romans and Egyptians, they had no concept of zero because they understood zero to mean nothing, and nothing doesn't exist. And so that which doesn't exist, well, why do you even have a concept of it? It doesn't exist. And so as far as that went, they were correct. That was a good insight. But in mathematics, zero is extremely useful. And so in India, they discovered the concept of zero. And the Mayan Indians in Central America also discovered zero. And that the zero is extremely useful. And so you find negative numbers and irrational numbers and so many things we use which don't actually correspond to things, but which are extremely useful in the understanding of the world of things. Therefore, we use such things all of the time in mathematics and physics and in engineering, so many different fields. So, again, the idea is that the indestructible can never be destroyed, and that indestructible is what we are. Our misery comes from identifying with the things about ourselves that are always changing. But if we can learn to identify with consciousness, the light which illuminates all my experience, which is really what I am, I don't lose anything by identifying with consciousness. I gain everything. If I can identify with that, then I find that no change is a threat to me. So then we go on to verse 18, which says, Andavanta ime deha nityas yokta sharirinaha anashino prameyasya tasmat yudhyasva bharata. So here he says, Antavanti ime deha. These bodies, they have a beginning and an end. These bodies actually it's just antavantas, antavat. They have an end. These bodies have an end. Your body, O Arjuna, the body of all of these soldiers, my body, all of these bodies have an end. They're andavanta. Nityas yokta sharirinaha. But the one dwelling in the body is nitya, is eternal. The one dwelling within the body is eternal, has no death. And so it's sharirina, sharirin, the one dwelling within a sharira, within a body, is eternal. Anashino aprameyasya. It's eternal, anashino aprameyasva. It's immeasurable, it can't be measured. So this which dwells within the body, that which you are, that which I am, that is indestructible, it's immeasurable. Tasmad yudhyasva bharata. Therefore fight, O Arjuna. Therefore fight. So again, remember that the context that Sri Krishna sees that Arjuna has come undone because he's afraid of the battle with he's not afraid, not afraid of death for himself, because he's a great heroic warrior. He's been trained as a great heroic warrior. So it's not that he's a coward. The problem is that he's afraid of killing others and therefore being the cause of the destruction of society, and the misery that will come to him knowing that he has killed his own kinsmen and his own respected teachers. And Sri Krishna is telling him that no, that which dwells within the body of each one of us, that which we are, that is anashi. And it is nitya. It's avinashi, it's without destruction, and it's nitya, that is, it's eternal. So the running translation is, these bodies of the eternal, imperishable, immeasurable, embodied self are said to have an end. So the imperishable, the self within the body is imperishable, but the bodies have an end. Therefore, fight, O descendant of Bharata. Excuse me. So here you'll find this refrain coming again and again, especially in the early chapters of the Gita, where he'll give Arjuna a teaching, and then suddenly in the midst of the teaching, he'll say, therefore, tasmad utishta Bharata, therefore stand up, O Bharata, or tasmad yudhyasva Bharata, therefore fight, O Bharata. So again, he's telling him the highest truth, but also there's an immediate situation that Arjuna has to face. And so he's saying that this is the eternal truth, no matter what your situation, but knowing this, now you're in this situation where you have to fight, so stand up and fight. And so that, as I've said in other classes, we have to always remember that Sri Krishna is teaching the Gita to us, that we are Arjuna. And so we're not on a physical battlefield, and yet we are in the battlefield of life, the Kurukshetra of our own life. Our own life is Kurukshetra, which is Dharmakshetra, the field of Dharma, where we exercise ourselves in the practice of Dharma. And so we're fighting on the battlefield of life, where every moment we're having to make decisions, whether to do this, whether to do that. Most of our decisions are not life and death decisions, luckily. Most of our decisions are very mundane, whether to go to this grocery store or that grocery store, whether to buy broccoli or cauliflower, whether to get up at this time or sleep in for another half an hour because I didn't sleep so well at night. But the fact is that every day, every moment, we're having to make decisions. And so Arjuna was making life and death decisions, or about to make them, when the battle would begin. But we make decisions every moment also. And so we have to take this teaching and then lead our lives. So for us also, this instruction is there. Tasmad yudhyasva Bharata. Therefore, knowing this, then face your life boldly, face your life bravely, and go forward, knowing this truth that Sri Krishna is teaching to us. That's why Swami Vivekananda said that late in his life, in his second trip to the West, he said, more and more, it's the heroism of the worm that I admire, who goes about its daily duties without any fanfare, without any praise or anything, just carrying on its daily life heroically. And he would say, he also said at that same time publicly, he said that, is there any one of you who is not carrying their cross, like the cross that Christ carried to Golgotha for his crucifixion? So is there any one of you who is not carrying their own little cross? Jesus carried a cross for the whole world, but we have to carry the cross of our own individual lives. All of us every day face so many problems, and we have to face them. We have to make decisions. Many times, even in our lives, we have to make decisions that we don't want to make, decisions which are hard to make, decisions where we don't know what the outcome is going to be, and so we don't really want to have to make it because we are afraid we might choose wrongly. But we have to stand up and go forward with life with the best information and the best light that we have, no matter how weak it might be. We have to go forward. And so for us, this is also meant, Tasmad yudhyasva Bharata, therefore stand up and fight. So then verse 19, he says, Yaenam vetti hantaram yaschainam manyate hatam ubhau tau navijanito nayam hanti na hanyate. So this is a verse which is shared with minor change with the Katha Upanishad. Several verses in the Gita and the Katha Upanishad are common. And this is one of them. So, Yaenam vetti hantaram, one who thinks that this, the self, you, when he says this, enam, this, he means you. You are the self. And so one who thinks that this self is the killer, hantaram, yaschainam manyate hatam, or one who thinks that this is killed, meaning that which I am. When I say I, right now I think of Swami Atmarupananda, the body-mind complex, born at such and such a place on such and such a date and so many years old, with this personal history. No, that's all ignorance. Eventually, when I say I, then the idea of the Atman should come. So this, again, language is calling it this, but this is I, that which I am. So this, one who thinks this to be the killer, or one who thinks this to be the killed, neither one knows the truth. Neither of these knows the truth. Nayam handi na hanyate. This neither kills nor is it killed. So you, if you were in battle, you would neither kill nor be killed, no matter how much action you were involved in, because the self is can neither kill nor be killed, because the self is eternal and the self never changes. The body engages in action, but the self is the silent witness. Our problem is that we identify the self with the body and mind and the ego, which takes responsibility for action. The kartaham, I am the doer. Kartaham iti manyate, one thinks I am the doer. Bhoktaham, I am the enjoyer. I am the experiencer, I am the doer. But no, I am the light which illuminates the doing, but I'm not the doing itself. As a lamp illuminates a room, and people do all kinds of things in the room, good things and bad things in the room, but the light illuminates both. The light has nothing to do with that which is done in the room. It's not the light's fault that someone forges a check in the room, nor is it the light's praise that someone writes a check to charity in the room. The light is just that which illuminates, which makes known that which is happening. And so we are that light which makes known everything. And because we are that light which makes everything known, we are the light in which everything happens. But we are not affected by that happening if we can realize that that's who we are. We find ourselves affected because I identify with the body and mind and say that I am the doer. Kartaham, I am the doer. So he who thinks the self is a slayer and he who thinks the self is slain, both are ignorant of the truth. The self neither slays nor is it slain. And then verse 20 says, Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuyaha ajo nitya shashvato yam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. So this continues the same thought, that na jayate mriyate va kadachin. This never is born, nor does it ever die. Nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuyaha. Nor is it that having once come into existence, that it will not come into existence again. So nayam bhutva, nor this having come into existence, will it not be again. So that is that once we exist now, but the fear is I'm going to die and I won't exist. No, that doesn't happen. I exist forever. Ajo nitya shashvato yam purano. This is unborn. We think that we were born. No, we were never born. This body was born. Body and mind were born. We weren't born. Nitya, eternal. Shashvato yam, lasting forever. Purano, the ancient one. Ancient because it existed even before the universe came into existence. It existed prior to the universe itself. The hanyate hanyamane sharire. It's not killed even when the body is killed. So even when this dies or is killed, I am not killed. I last forever. As Swami Vivekananda says, turning the pages of the book of life, I read page after page. Scene after scene comes before me. Now, in Swamiji's time, they had Edison had just invented the movie camera, but it was not. They weren't making movies yet, and so Swamiji didn't have the facility of that, or didn't have the advantage of that analogy. But that's a better analogy even than the book. So his analogy that we're turning the pages of the book of life one after another. But an even more apt illustration we have now is that we're watching the movie of life. We're watching the movie of life. Scene after scene appears, but we are the witness. Like when we're watching a movie in the cinema hall or in the comfort of our home, we see the movie. We see in the movie as we forget ourselves and get involved in the action, we identify with the characters in the movie and the scenery and everything. We're going in the movie, we're flying to London, and then we take a train and the ferry and another train to Paris, and we do all kinds of things. We get on a roller coaster in the fairgrounds and do all sorts of things. But no, we haven't been anywhere. We're right where we always were. It's just scene after scene in the movie that's appearing before us. And yet, if it's a good movie, we forget ourselves and we get so involved in the action that we actually feel that we're living in the midst of the play. So in life, scene after scene is coming, and eventually this scene will pass from us when we die, but then other scenes will come. And so there's never a time when we won't exist. It's not that having come into existence, we will stop existing. So as the running translation has it, the self is not born and it does not die at any time. Najayate mriyate va kadachi. And it does not again come into existence by being born. It is birthless, constant, eternal, and ancient. It is not slain when the body is slain. So it does not come into existence again by being born. No, it was already existent. And it's birthless, constant, eternal, and ancient, not slain when the body is slain. So again, Sri Krishna is teaching this to Arjuna because he's on the battlefield. So this is the teaching that Arjuna was in the need of so that he could do his duty. And 21 continues, Veda vinashinam nityam yaenam majamavyayam katham sa purusha partha kam ghatayati hantikam. Veda avinashinam nityam yaenam ajamavyayam. As often in Sanskrit, you have to start at the end to work back in English. So katham sa purusha partha kam ghatayati hantikam. How, O Partha, O Arjuna, can that self, can that being, that Purusha, that self, kill or be killed? How can it be kill or be killed? That which is avinashi, that which is indestructible, eternal, unborn, and unchanging. When that self is indestructible, eternal, unborn, and unchanging, how can it kill and how can it be killed? So the running translation says, Whom, O Partha, can that person who knows this self to be imperishable, constant, birthless, and immutable, slay or cause to be slain? And how? How can they, who can cause it to be, who can kill or cause it to be killed, and how can they do it? When the person knows the self to be imperishable, constant, birthless, immutable, etc. So again, appealing to Arjuna's, or teaching Arjuna the nature of the self so that he will be able to carry forward his duties. Of course, the highest purpose of this knowledge is for the realization. But it helps us, as Swami Vivekananda said, this knowledge helps us in our everyday life. That's why Swami Vivekananda said, the knowledge of the self, the knowledge of Advaita, the knowledge of non-dualism will help the fisherman be a better fisherman, a lawyer be a better lawyer, a student to be a better student, etc. It will help us right here in our everyday life, because it will give us the courage to face life. And it will give us the ability to face life knowing a higher standpoint, taking away the cause of fear, taking away the cause of anxiety. And so Swamiji saw that it had practical implications here. And he says it in that same statement where he says, this knowledge of non-duality will help the fisherman be a better fisherman, the lawyer a better lawyer, etc. He goes on to say, and eventually it will help them to realize the highest truth. So he saw that it had, even for ordinary people, even for the fisherman, even for the lawyer, even for the student, it had practical significance here and now. And so that is what Sri Krishna is teaching also. The Sri Krishna of Vrindavan is Sri Ramakrishna, or Sri Ramakrishna is the Krishna of Vrindavan, who played his divine play. And Swami Vivekananda is the Krishna of Kurukshetra. You see that the same Sri Krishna had the play in Vrindavan, and he also was the teacher on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And so Sri Ramakrishna, he played his wonderful divine play, like in Vrindavan. And Swami Vivekananda was the one who came out onto the battlefield of life and taught us how to use that teaching of Sri Ramakrishna in our daily life. And so just as it would help Arjuna to face the battlefield, so it should help us to face the problems of our daily life. And let me do at least one more verse, maybe another couple. Excuse me. Verse 22 says, Vasamsi jirnani yata vihaya navani grihnati naro parani tatha sharirani vihaya jirnan yanyani sanyati navani dehi. So Vasamsi jirnani yata vihaya, just as we take worn out clothes, we cast away worn out clothes, navani grihnati naro parani, and the person takes up other new clothes. So just as we cast off worn out clothes and take new clothes to ourselves, tata sharirani vihaya jirnani, so we cast off worn out bodies, anyani sanyati navani dehi, and take on new bodies. So this is the doctrine of rebirth, the idea that when this body is worn out, whether it happens in youth or middle age or old age, at some point the body stops functioning, it wears out, and the body falls off. But then we take on a new body, just as we take off worn out clothes and put on fresh clothes. It's the same phenomenon. So just as a person gives up worn out clothes and puts on other new ones, even so does the embodied self give up decrepit bodies and enter other new ones. So again, just as we don't weep when we have to change clothes, we realize that those clothes have worn out, or they're dirty and need to be cleaned, whichever way. I need to take on new clothes. I need to put on new clothes. That's just a natural phenomenon. There's nothing to weep about. So when this body wears out, it's cast aside, and then another body comes. Not that that's the goal of life. The goal is to go beyond samsara, go beyond the very need to take birth. But as long as we need to take birth, as long as we need to work our way through the Kurukshetra of this world, we'll keep coming back body after body, until we finally solved the problem of life, until we finally realized God, come to God, and then we remain in a state of blessedness, a state of infinite bliss, infinite knowledge, infinite awareness forever. That is, we go outside of time itself and remain in a timeless state of infinite wisdom, infinite joy, infinite fulfillment, which can never come to an end. There's nothing outside of it. But until that time, we don't have to worry that I'm not going to exist, that if I die, I'm going to disappear. No, we don't disappear at all. This present life disappears, just as when we wake up from a dream and the dream disappears. So this will all disappear, and another vision will come in front of us. And that will go on, and another vision will come in front of us with another body. You see, it's a strange thing when you think about what is a world, a loka, the different lokas in the Hindu tradition. And this is one loka, bhu-loka, the earthly realm. You never experience a world without a body. Whether you're an insect, a tree, a dog, a cat, a cow, or a human being, it's through a body that you experience the world. Body and world come together. You can't have a world without a body. It's a strange thing, but there's no possibility of an existence without someone to experience that existence. And so this body and this world are tied together. And so when this vision goes, because this body has disappeared, then another body tied to another world appears. And then we're in another loka. But we can't be in a loka without an appropriate body for that loka. So we find ourselves in another body in a different loka. And then perhaps we spend some time in another loka, and then we have to come back to bhu-loka, to come back to earth and reincarnate here. Or some people may reincarnate very quickly after passing away. But for most, there is an interim where we are in another loka, in a subtle body for some time. And then suddenly we find ourselves taking birth again into this, in another world, in another body. But the body, we go from body to body, and the body is tied to the world. Without a body, there is no world. So let me take one more verse, and then I'll see if there are any, well, no, actually, the next three verses are tied together. So it continues the same idea, but really three verses here, 23, 24, and 25 are tied together. So let me stop here rather than starting one and then beginning in the middle of it next time. So let me see now at this point if there are any questions, if anyone has any questions or comments. I'll take those and then we'll close for today.
Shall I have a question, can I?
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Maharaj, this verse 22, where you said the body takes like worn out clothes, wear a new clothes,
Yes.
or even the leaf you have eaten, your food you have already eaten, throw the leaf out. All these things, when it comes to the concept, can we say in one lifespan, a person can have two bodies? That is, the body which full of attachment. After that, he renounces completely. So he is moving from one body to another body in terms of renunciation. Can we say in one lifespan, person can have two bodies instead of going to a rebirth?
I wouldn't exactly, I get your point, and the point is good, but I wouldn't call it a new body, because in one sense, the body is dying every minute because it's constantly changing. So the body I had when we began this class 50 minutes ago, it's not the same body now, because it has been changing every moment. And so in that sense, the body is changing all of the time. But in a practical sense, I have this same body with its changes, with its constant changes from birth to death. I am filled at some point in my life with the spirit of renunciation, and I renounce the world and so forth. I still have the same body, but and what to speak of renunciation? Even if I remain as a devotee, but I turn to the life of devotion and I become devoted to God, and I began to worship God, pray to God, do japa, etc. Then yes, this body itself becomes purified. This body itself changes and becomes purified. But instead of thinking that I give up this body and take on a new body, no, it's the same body, just with a new orientation of mind, and the body itself becomes purified because of that new orientation. Sri Ramakrishna says in the Kotamrita, the Gospel, that the devotee in time, through the practice of devotion, their whole body is remade. So it's not that, again, this body falls off and another body comes, but that this body itself, which has been going through changes from the time of birth, now goes through a radical purification and transformation. But because it's a gradual process, we still call it the same body. And Partha, what is that?
They say the monk is reborn. That's why I'm asking that question.
Yes.
Yeah, so that means the other part of the body is gone, he's reborn. So he doesn't have to go, the physical body has to not die, then take a rebirth. But they say in the same lifespan, a monk is reborn.
Yes, no, that is true. What you're saying is true. And when we take sannyasa, then we perform our own shraddha ceremony, our own funeral ceremony, our own last rites, because we won't have progeny to perform the shraddha for us. So we perform our own. And so it's considered that from that time, we are like bhutas, we're like ghosts, because we've performed our own funeral rites. So that's a manner of saying. Yes, that's a manner of saying. Okay, Partha, you had a question also, did you? Oh, and then you.
Swamiji, I have got a question.
Okay.
This is Sriram here.
Okay.
So you were talking about the universe coming into existence from the Brahman. But why does the universe exist in the first place instead of nothing? Why is there something instead of nothing? Or is that a paradoxical question in the first place, as the question itself is kind of invalid without existence?
Yes. Well, the latter is correct. The question is one of the unanswerables. Vedanta says that there are certain questions which we can't answer, not because we don't know enough, but because the question has an inherent contradiction which makes it impossible to answer. And so the universe, why does the universe exist? Or why did the universe come out of Brahman? The question is assuming that there is a reason, that is, there's a cause. Looking for a reason means looking for a cause in some sense. A cause for the uncaused to come into existence, to appear as the universe. So we're asking, what is the reason that which is beyond all causation, which means beyond all reason, what is the reason why that became this universe? And so all that we can say is that the universe is. And we can say from the experience of many whole lineage of saints and sages for thousands of years, that those who go beyond the universe find that the reality is not the universe, that the universe appears. And so the universe is in our experience now, so we can't deny it. We see it right here. But when we attain to realization, we find that, well, the universe was never what I thought it was. It was always God. I was mistaking it. So why did I mistake it? Well, that's Maya. There's no explanation for why that happened, because it's asking why about that where there is no why. It's like saying, it's the same thing, one of the other unanswerable questions, and it's a parallel, maybe a little easier to understand, is when did the universe come into being? So you're asking, before the universe, there was only the Brahman, which was outside of time and space. There's no time, there's no space. So the question is, at what time did Brahman manifest to the world? Well, Brahman, there's no time in Brahman. So the question itself is contradictory. And so that's why it's called Maya, meaning that it can't be understood in its own terms, but it can be transcending.
Okay, okay, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Partha, you had a question at one point. Unmute yourself.
I can ask one question, Maharaji. I mean,
Okay, go ahead,
if I may.
Partha. Go ahead and try to unmute yourself, Partha. And in the meantime, Shonak has a question. Go ahead, Shonak.
Yeah, so is there a way that we can probably put an end to this movie? I mean, by any means?
Yes, we can. And of course, not that this is implied in your question, but the suicide is not a way to do it, because we just get more of the same.
Right. It's not that. I mean, is it something that we over a period of time, can we shorten this experience? And
Yes, and that's what yoga is. As Swami Vivekananda says, everyone is moving towards realization. Everyone is moving towards the knowledge of Brahman, because that's who you are. That can't be hidden forever. It seems to be hidden forever right now. It seems like it's so far away that how could I ever realize that? But no, all of our experiences in life are taking us towards that. So nature itself is taking us towards that. Life itself is taking us towards that. But yoga is saying, I don't want to wait for evolution to take me to that. I want to find out the truth now. And so let me follow a path of discipline which will take me there. So all of the 4 yogas will take us to that. That's the way of speeding it up. The 4 yogas
so much.
plus
Yes.
God's grace.
Yes,
God's grace also.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay, Partha.
Yes, Maharaj, can you please talk a little bit more about verse number 20? There is a word called Purana.
Yes. Yes.
And there are a lot of people, including Shankaracharya, had given commentary on the real meaning of Purana. Can you, like for example, I remember Pura Api Nava Iti. There are so many things we see in our life, like sunrise every day, sunset every day, and the morning when everything gets up. So even though we see many things every day, but it never becomes old. It's always ever new, So it's a beautiful, yeah. Can you please talk a little bit about it?
Yes, so basically Purana means old, and so that the Puranas, the texts called Puranas, are the old books, meaning they're the books of the history of the culture. But yes, the derivative meaning, there's that which is old but never, but always new. And so it's like one of the 5 sacred names of Shiva is Sadhyo Jata. He who is born every moment. Sadhyo Jata means born every moment, because the reality is new every moment. So it's old, Purana, but it's also Nava. It's also new. It's old because as far back in time as you can go, the self was before that. The divine self was even before that. If you could go back to the beginning of the universe, you'd find that even before that was the universe, was Brahman. And so, as far back as you go, it was there already. So it's the most ancient one, but it's new because it's timeless, and so it never gets old. And so people ask sometimes well, what happens after Nirvikalpa Samadhi, after enlightenment? What happens after enlightenment? Because many people are worried that, I get enlightenment, but then what do I do? Then what? Well, you don't have to worry about that. If we get to enlightenment, we find that experience is always new. Here, if we have the same experience over and over again, we get tired of it.
Mm.
I noticed years ago that if there's some food item that I like a lot, say I like chocolate ice cream or something like that. If I eat a certain amount, it tastes good. And then I think that I enjoyed that so much, let me eat some more. There comes a point where you keep eating it and you lose the taste. You think, I'm only getting a stomachache now and I'm not even tasting it. And so anything that we repeat now becomes old and we get bored with it. We say, okay, I don't want that anymore. Even if you take the thing that you like most, if somebody keeps stuffing it into your mouth nonstop, then you'll get sick. But this is not like that. This is always new, meaning that it never gets old.
Right.
It's old because it was before time itself began, but it's new because it never gets old. It's always like a wonder. When we see something that makes us, strikes us with wonder, what happens? Think, oh my God, I've never seen this before. This is so surprising. Surprising means it's new, something I couldn't imagine. And so this is like that, eternally. And so it's old and new both.
Thank you.
Okay. So here we'll conclude. And let me just say for announcements that next week at this time, I have a conference I have to attend. So what I'm planning to do, and Shonaka will keep you informed, but what I'm planning to do is to record this class before time, so that at this same time, 10 o'clock next Saturday, the recorded class can be shown just as this is being shown. And so we'll still have the class next week, and I will give the class, but it won't be a live class, but it will be as good as a live class.
Right.
Only thing is, you can't ask questions afterwards. Okay, so let me give a closing chant, and then I will say goodbye to all for now. So this is from the Gita Dhyanam, verse 9. Om Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutastun Bandi Divya Istavai Vedai Sangapada Kramopanishadair Gayandiyam Samagaha Dhyanavasthita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyandiyam Yogino Yasyandam Navidu Sura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha. We bow to that Supreme Being, whom Brahma and the other gods praise with divine hymns, whose glories the singers of the Sama hymns sing through the Vedas and Upanishads, whom the yogis see with their mind absorbed in that through meditation, and whose end and beginning neither the gods nor the asuras know. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om Peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So, namaskar to all.